Hey, welcome to Live from America podcast. Hatem is here along with two of my friends, very good friends and amazing guests. The one and only Mike Pesca. He's a host of many, many, many successful podcasts. I can't keep track anymore of how many podcasts you have. You multitasker, author, journalist, cool guy. You got it all, Mike.
Thanks. I have not only do I have many podcasts, I have many podcast flags for my microphone for those visually inclined.
Yeah, and he's a cool guy to listen to and follow. And do you have any books coming up, Mike?
No, I mean I'll be reading some, but
Yeah, and he have one of my favorite books ever. He's the author of um, the best what ifs in sports, right? And I
yes,
always
I have
told
no
you should.
soccer one in there though. I
I
should
told
have.
I told you, yeah, for many years you should do one for soccer, and the World Cup is here. And my second guest, and amazing guy and a great friend as well, is Michel Paradis, lawyer, attorney, professor, author of many great books as well. And he's here,
I
and you're
am.
both a regular guest in this. Welcome, Michel.
My pleasure. It's great to be back. Happy 250th.
I know that's what we're going to talk about today, America, 250 years of America, but oh my God, it's so fucking hot. What's going on here?
One of America's greatest contributions to the world, no doubt.
I will say that they changed how they used to do the feels like temperature, the wet bulb thing, and it always used to have, I mean, it would be 85 degrees and then they'd say it feels like 97, and I never thought it felt like 97. Now it's in a more narrow band, but you could still get the old feels like. Amazon defaults to the old feels like Alexa does. So at least we know more accurately what it actually feels like.
Yeah, I never know what it feels like. So
Yeah.
that's good.
And it feels to who?
Yeah,
Because
well, it's like the wind chill. Where does wind chill go in summer? Where does feels like go in winter? That's what we need to do is
Yeah.
swap those concepts.
Are they the same thing, right? Is it like the evening star and the morning star? Is it a philosophical conundrum, right? We're just two names for the same things from different directions.
Do you want to leave it as that ponderable, that freshman year bong hit ponderable, or do you want the answer? Because I know.
Oh, you do know? Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, give
they're
it to
not
me.
the same
I
thing.
like the bong hit ponderable though, as you can
Yeah,
tell.
the feels like is a wind chill. Sorry, the wind chill is a straight calculation, and it's fairly accurate. The feels like is they literally wrap a bulb in a wet, damp cloth, and they see what the thermometer would be based on the humidity. So human beings aren't a bulb wrapped in wet cloth, but it is a humidity multiplier that was exaggerated and inaccurate and is now not. So in some ways, it has run the opposite of everything else in our culture, where it has gotten less exaggerated over time.
Wow, that's amazing. So, but both of them are genuinely empirical measures, right? There's actually something there. It's not
They
just
are,
like,
but like when it's so miscalculated, it's empirical, but wrong,
yeah,
right? It was. Now
yeah.
it's empirical, but I'm going to say right, or at least sensible. It doesn't really go up more than 5 degrees.
Okay, so there's like but like I guess like both of those are describing subjective experiences, right? So you could sort
I
of
know.
say like you could call it the humidity multiplier or the wind discount or something, but
Yeah.
like they're expressed in these very, how is it feeling?
Right.
Way.
Feels like I think is a little dicey because it is very subjective. And then I want, well, what is the feels like in a down coat? What is the
Yeah.
feels like in a turtleneck? We have all
yeah,
these different. You set your phone to all of the garments that you may be wearing.
what's interesting is
It's like
like
vibes. Like, what are the temperature vibes? Like, that's what you're really getting.
I
Vibes are
think it would be
important.
like with AI, it should be feels like to you. Like it should be more
Yeah.
specific now to you. You know?
Get a
It
cut. Like,
feels
each
like
person
you
has their own wet rag.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it says like it feels like you shouldn't be out. For
Or instead of
you.
a yeah, instead of a temperature, it could be like feels like back in 1997 when you were in Capistrano and in love or whatever.
Yeah.
Feels like that time you took too much
Or it
Mad
feels like
Dog
the people that
2020.
you like, they're not gonna want to hang out. So or
Yeah.
they
Feels like
do.
when you're hitting a bong freshman year and you're asking, what does it feel like? What his feels like?
It's
Is
crazy.
this?
But I tell you, like one thing is like, being born in Kuwait, Kuwait is recorded that one of the hottest days in the planet. I think the hottest day in the planet. We don't have really forecasts. It's always hot. So,
What?
and it doesn't like feel like or doesn't feel like it's nothing. you know.
It's like, what's
So
the point?
yeah,
What do you, yeah.
250 years of America. Happy birthday. And if you were like me and got the notification late about changing the time of fireworks yesterday, and then you arrived and there's nothing, and it's like, what happened? Um, I don't know, but I hope you all enjoyed your day yesterday. So we filming this on the following day, July 5th, which is the day that we won against the aliens in Independence Day movie. We don't have those movies anymore. But so 250 years, and I want to kind of cover it in 1 hour, a lot of things. But first question, what is America to you? So let's go, Michelle.
To me, what is America to me? I would say first and foremost, it's my home, right? I've lived abroad, and I think the best way to appreciate America is to live in foreign countries. Not because you don't like the foreign countries, but there's a sense of home that you have when you're abroad that you really only understand from that perspective. I think, getting more into freshman year bong hit territory, where I would also say it's an idea to me, right? Like it's one of the few countries in the world that anyone can genuinely belong to and be thought of by at least most of their fellow citizens as a member, even if they, have a foreign accent, no matter how they look, right? There is this idea that
What do you
as a
mean by
nation,
have a foreign accent? Do you have an example?
well, let's say you had like
I'm
a
just joking. I'm just
Kuwaiti
joking.
Egyptian accent,
Yeah, I
and I
know.
would
I know
still
what you're
sort of
trying to
vaguely,
say.
yeah. And we would still dislike you as much as we dislike every other fellow citizen in the United States. We'd still
Yeah.
give you the same hard time and fear and carry a gun around to make sure
And
you
by the
didn't
way,
come out.
if you don't know Michelle, he's again, I sometimes I don't introduce the whole thing because I know you so well, but I forget that some people still maybe not know you. One of the top human rights lawyers and international law lawyers in the country. So it's great coming from him. Mike, what about you? What is America to you?
It's growth, opportunity, risk, ambition, a fair amount of disorder, a an allergy to conformity. That's a big one. Yeah, it's a lot of those things that it wants to be. Some excess, lots of excess, especially when compared to other places. Convenience these days, there's a lot of emphasis on convenience. But I do also think that the freedoms of the First Amendment, especially, that's one that is big and different from everywhere else. And that's important. Other places want to have speedy trials and fair trials and try to figure out the best way to adjudicate guilt and innocence. But I think things like the hugely disparate and chaotic nature, allowing for a lot of growth and a lot of opportunity, but also bigger gaps and less safety than other advanced countries. It's worked out pretty well, I have to say.
Yeah. To me, I agree. It's the same thing. I think it's an idea, and I agree with Michelle too. Living somewhere else at any point of your life, or being raised somewhere else, or have uh, immigrants' parents or grandparents or whatever, and you move in, the feeling of equally belonging and not belonging goes to everybody, equally. Um, and I think it's something that you look forward to, like when you have like a movie where there's an area where you're supposed to reach to be safe and start new life, or like Planet of the Apes if you're trying to find the planet Earth. So a lot of times it feels like Earth, it feels like this is the planet. And I know there's a lot of good things and a lot of bad things, but the idea and the ability to talk about it, I think a lot of people don't freely. And I was in one of the World Cup games, Egypt versus Iran, from all games, and
Who are you rooting for?
well, it doesn't matter. I didn't root for anybody because I thought they would think I'm rooting for the war or something. So Egypt, of
This
course.
was this was
But
the
you know
gay
what's funny
rights
is
game
like,
in Seattle, right?
yeah, it was in Seattle, and it was like that Pride game, and but I was, it was one of the, I video call was with Noam too. I show him some stuff. I think one of the greatest scenes were like, the thousands of Iranians raising their flag, protecting by American cops. It was just amazing. So that's what's America to me, and I think it's like you don't get that feeling unless you really live somewhere else. I think a lot of people take it for granted, and a lot of people don't appreciate it. But that's why we do it. So when you think of America, what would be, to you, like say five things, words of ideas, anything that immediately come to you? Let's go one by one. So let's go one, Michelle, one, Mike.
Sure. So, biggest ideas. I'm going to go something very simple, which is like one of our contributions to the world, but I think it is difficult to overestimate its impact, is air conditioning, right? Like, because air conditioning is this interesting, extremely American idea of taming the natural world to make it as convenient and comfortable and, sort of welcoming to you as possible. And if you go back, all the way to our, pilgrim mythology, it's all about sort of coming to this new world, a harsh and sort of necessary, kind of uninviting place, and then taming it to serve humanity in some way. And it's hard to think about like we wouldn't have Arizona or Nevada or most of Texas, or the South, right? The South would be is and was a very different place precisely because it didn't have air conditioning. And so the idea of creating places in the world that are fit for people to thrive in, regardless of what the earth may have in store for us, is an incredibly American, incredibly optimistic idea. Has some downsides, but I think is also an extremely American idea that most of our European friends who came to the United States to enjoy the World Cup, I think were both stunned, horrified, and delighted by, all in equal measure.
Mike?
That's a great one, by the way. Nelly
It is
Bowles
a great one.
brought
I
that.
never thought of it.
It's good. I was going to go grandiose, and I listed some in the beginning, like risk and opportunity. But how about risk calculation? Because other places are much riskier, just taking your life in your hands. But there are other places that are much less risky. And I was reading about in Europe of companies that are worth $50 billion now. There have been just a couple that were created in the last 100 years. And in the United States, there have been hundreds and hundreds that were created in the last 100 years. And so I know that the question is, all right, well, does that wealth just accumulate to the creators? And the answer is no. So we're so dynamic because I think well, I don't know that we've perfected the risk calculation, but we've perfected it for ourselves. We've perfected it to the extent that if you surveyed 1,000 leading thinkers 100 years ago, what's the best way for a society to balance the rewards of risk and the downside? They'd come up something, I think, like what America looks like today. It might blow them away what America looks like today in the entrepreneurship and, to some extent, the safety nets that we can improve upon, but that coincide with the engine that we created. We're really good. We're really good at creating the engine of entrepreneurship, I think.
I go with my first, I would say the inventions of many things, but I'll go like specific with the COVID vaccine. I think it's always underrated. The time that was it created and found the solution, and I know there's a lot of debate about it, but the truth is it saved the planet, saved a lot of, and the fact that during that time, the actual care of the American people in terms of like providing the vaccines for free, providing the tests, the way it was right. I think that was uh, taking care of people, even sending money, regardless if you like it or not, but just the idea of taking care of their citizens in that specific situation. But I will go with the COVID vaccine, specifically. Michelle.
Um, I'll go with two things that are going to sound different, but that actually intersect, because they're both really part of the entertainment industry. One is humor, right? Like humor exists all around the world for sure, and every country and culture has comedy of its own kind. Um, but the United States has had, probably one of the most vibrant comedy cultures going back through our entire history, and it's this beautiful mixture of international comedy culture, right? Because we have everything from the Borscht Belt to sort of Mark Twain, right? There's no one American style of comedy, but comedy runs through absolutely everything, even where it shouldn't be, right? I know you're coming from the comedy world and comedy cellar, but the fact that our politics have, are now sort of interlaced with essentially the sort of the rhythms and the styles and the attitudes built into comedy, I think just shows how deep just the comic idea and the comic mind is in the United States. But relatedly, I would also say hip hop is one of the great sort of American inventions as well, and for a very similar reason, right? It's this style of music that was that could really have only taken place in the United States because of the mixture of our urban environment, the immigrant cultures, the various sort of musical traditions that all mixed in together, that are all basically built around two core ideas. If you think about like what hip hop is trying to sort of what hip hop does, right? It's this mixture of attitude, right? There's a very, very strong sense of attitude in hip hop music allows you to convey because it's a kind of spoken word poetry. So it's very, very, it's very, very dependent upon who the performer is for what the message is and what the vibes are, right? You don't cover hip hop songs the way you cover rock songs or something like that. Um, and but also just this like malleability, right? You can put anything into a hip hop song and it's gonna fit, or you can make it fit. And so that combination of personality driven um sort of entertainment mixed with a kind of like jazz on steroids, which is really an way of thinking about hip hop. Gets to the same basic aspect of of our entertainment culture, right? Because it actually forms not just the entertainment and the amusements in our culture, but intervenes in politics and policy and how we think about things. Those very same ideas, right? We have a very personalist, charismatic politics for good and for bad. Um, and I think hip hop and comedy have those same veins. There's just and America just has these very strong traditions in both that actually tend to export pretty well. Comedy maybe a little less so, but hip hop, obviously, hip hop's taken over the world as the dominant musical form. And I don't think anyone would have predicted that 30 years ago.
Yeah.
But it very much has, and it has in a very American way. And last thing I'll say about it is, especially because when you listen to hip hop from other countries, um, it is like it's clearly from that country, right? That attitude, that personality, but it has the sort of basics of American hip hop, and it's a kind of again an idea, a way of doing music that translates and can be picked up no matter what your background traditions are. So yeah, I would say hip hop and comedy are great American entertainment exports.
I was definitely gonna say stand-up comedy. That was one of my things on my list. Comedy, like you said, it's all over the world. Everybody express it. I think comedy is amazing art form because a lot of people think it's just fun. It's usually comes from pain. So a lot of it expressed in certain way by funny. But stand-up comedy as an art itself started, and it's an American art, an American way of performing, and it's taken over the world now. There's a lot of international, and stand-up comedians that express themselves, but it is always started. It's now trying to get kind of like what you said about hip hop. It's trying to get like their own style and their own step, but it's always you feel like they have an American idol, like either Chappelle or Richard Pryor or whoever. But I would go with excellence in sports with keeping the human part of it. You still, there's a lot of excellent sports based on, you know, like it almost like Nazi camps. Like you have to wake up at this time in Russia and in China and a lot of stuff. And there's a lot of talented people all over the world. But I think the way excellent in sports here and the way some of our athletes are, uh, it's the environment of competition that's based here in the United States. That's why in the Olympics, you see a lot of them are thriving throughout all sports. So I would
Yeah.
choose that. Mike.
I'll comment on the two things you guys just raised. Well, also second comedy. And when all the like Jimmy Carr and the comedians who will stop by the Comedy Cellar and you talk to them, it's apparent and impressive and prideful that it is the American art form that they've chosen to pick up. Without America, there'd be no stand up as they know it. So let's take hip hop, which is the dominant form of music, which bestrides the world now. But before that, it was rock and roll, which I would have assumed for the rest of my life would just pretty much be synonymous with music or pop music. It's much less so. But Americans invented and rock and roll came from blues and swing and country and R&B invented by America, 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 America. I understand that the Negro spiritual coming out of West Africa influenced a lot of the rhythms of rhythm and blues and definitely the blues. But these are all American art forms, one leading to the other, and which is an excellent argument against appropriation being a bad thing. You all borrow and pastiche and create something new out of what came before. So the invention of these art forms is quintessentially American. And as far as sports, oh, I'll link hip hop and sports. I was a sports reporter for a long time, and I was covering, I guess, the second iteration of the Dream Team, and I was interviewing Lamar Odom. And I noted to him, "You're a lot older than some of these guys, Steph Curry or some of the younger guys on the team." Then he said, "Yes, but we're all united by hip hop. We're all of the hip hop generation." And I had never considered hip hop anything other than, another word for rap or rap plus some of the aesthetics around it. It was Lamar Odom who opened my eyes to that. That's interesting. And so
Wow.
sports, here's the great thing about sports. When I was covering the Olympics, I forgot who it was, maybe a coach or maybe someone with the US Olympic Committee said, here's the different thing. China sends its participants to the Olympics, and Germany sends its participants to the Olympics. In America, Americans send our Olympians to the Olympics. In other words, there's very little funding on the national level. We don't have the equivalent of the minister of sport. We fund it ourselves and we believe in it ourselves. And we do pretty well. Yes, I know we are the third most populous country in the world, but look at the most populous country in the world, India. They never win anything in the Olympics. They're the worst. And then look at the second most populous country, China. They win a lot, but it's because it's a dictatorship where they think of sports as they do industrial production. So the way the United States does sports is a little dominant, but it is in fact a lot to make you proud. I would like us to do the arts or put as much emphasis on the arts as we do with sports. So if we have an artsy kid and a sportsy kid, they'll have as many opportunities to excel. But it's pretty good. I'm glad that it's a great counterexample to the systems of, I guess, being part of a guild. Like if they identify you as a good 13-year-old soccer player in the Netherlands, you go to the Ajax system and then you maybe never get out or get a real education. So the United States, I know we link our sports to our secondary education. That's kind of weird. A lot of it is kind of weird, but that's okay. America's a weird, quirky place, and we invented a lot of it too. Don't take that
Yeah.
for granted, right?
I mean,
Like electoral college, that's bad. It's like, well, we invented democracy after the Greeks, so you got to give us a break.
yeah, I think, there's with everything that we say, obviously we can take it as the negative ways as well, but we're talking about just the good part. We will talk about negative in a few. But yeah, I think sports exactly like you said it, better than I said it, but I think it's the way we do it, not in a government style, but like individual, and also the dream. It links
Hello?
back to the idea, to the American dream that you can make it, yeah, if you really work hard on it. So let's take one more, and then we'll go about people and leaders. Michelle.
So this is a probably cliche one, but I actually think it gets to all the answers and even some of your answers too, is immigration, right?
Yeah.
Like no matter how harsh our immigration laws are at times, and right now I would very much say that we've gone in a very negative direction in that respect. We have some of the most open immigration laws in the world, even today. Like even today, under Donald Trump, we have some of the broadest immigration laws in the world, and it makes our country amazing, right? It's given us extraordinary economic growth. It's given us an extraordinary cultural growth. All of that appropriation and pastiche, frankly, is just harder in a place where, to the extent you're going to ever meet someone from another country, it's going to be like on a vacation or in some sort of very odd, sort of like specific situation. Right here, I live in New York City. Like I can walk through neighborhoods that are dedicated to particular cultures, and that can inspire me to just think about something in a different way when I'm building a pastiche or writing about something. And that all of these things, whether it's hip hop, rock and roll, jazz, right? These are all um, and even sort of American styles of sports, right? These are all mixed and matched ideas that wouldn't be possible if we just didn't have all these people here. And I love the fact that, some of the most iconic Chinese food in the United States, like fortune cookies, General Tso's chicken, right? All were invented in the United States. Like you actually bring someone from China, they have no idea what the hell that is. Same thing with a lot of Italian food, right? Even pizza, like as we understand it, is not at all Italian. And so the idea that we have all these people who come here and keep it their own, right? Like they bring what's best about their and sometimes what's worst about their home countries here, but we mix and match it and do something that's just far more interesting and far greater than the sum of any one of its parts. I think is one of our great advantages as a culture, economically, culturally, you name it. But it also just makes living here so much nicer than it would be. And so yeah, immigration, the idea, and I say the last thing I'll say on that is I say that as someone who's, with the exception of like some Irish I have in me, like my family's traced themselves back to like the 1500s, right? So like I am, what do they call them now? Like vintage Americans or what? I can't remember the new sort of racist term for
Yeah,
white
there's a
people.
VDAR word for that exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like heritage Americans or something.
That's
Like
it.
I am about it.
Like a
I am like
tomato.
yeah, I am so heritage like my family's traced themselves but well back before America. But my favorite thing about this country is its immigration. So
Yeah, and
I'll go ahead, Hatem.
no, go ahead, Mike, and then I'll go.
Yeah, I'll riff on that and say, obviously, right now, the right is cracking down on immigration and getting us away from that tradition. But the left, a good argument can be made that when left unchecked, it gave rise to these crackdowns that we're experiencing. As David Frum said, if Democrats don't oversee the immigration policy, fascists will, right? So that's important. And, now I was just listening to a good interview with the professor Ivan Krachik,
Mike, can
pointed
you make your
out
mic a little
that
bit louder?
I will, it's over there, but I'll
Oh,
talk a
another.
little louder and say
Okay.
that Austria has a higher percentage of foreign born people than the United States does. And that's shocking. And when I heard that, I wasn't proud. I said to myself, well, we got to get past Austria. This is a point of national pride to us. Immigration is so important to who we are and who we've ever been. It has to be done rationally. But I'll also say, in my own experience, oh, and another thing that the left, and this might be the far left, deserves criticism for is once they got away from the idea of the melting pot, it hurt our immigration policy because once from e pluribus unum, from many one, once we rejected that, or some aspects of the academy rejected that, then we weren't becoming the thing that we could look around and say, but this guy's from Syria, but he's an American, and that woman's from China, but she's an American, and she doesn't understand General Tso's chicken. It says, you guys eat this all the time, it'll kill you. She's right, but I appreciate that perspective. And once we got away from that, it hurt a little bit to the point where in New York City, whenever I interact with anyone of a different religion or an immigrant community, it's inoculating from all the worst arguments that I hear about them. Like I always hear that this cabal of Muslims, let's say, Hatem, are out to get us. But I never meet those Muslims who are out to get us. I guess they might exist. I know that every once in a while, one of them will show up in the news with a thwarted plan. But mostly I see a bunch of integrated Americans who might not agree with your rock rib Democrats from Nebraska, but might on a lot of issues. And they're more patriotic than, the kind of people who reject the melting pot. So immigration has not only been a boon to the country, but it really helps the people who aren't immigrants, who were here many generations ago.
And I want to, add again that I know that every point that we talk, we can talk about the negative parts of it, but just the fact that it exists, there's a lot of positive. We will talk about some negative later, but to that point, immigration, I'm gonna link it with sports and especially the World Cup, since I'm wearing the World Cup hat, and it's happening here. The idea being, I think I'm the only first generation immigrant here, unless you guys perfected your accent for some reason. Um, Everybody's an immigrant, so they all come at some point, but they always have that feeling of like, the next generation is more immigrant. But the idea of belonging, like I said in the beginning, and not belonging with even, terms. Like when you're here, you feel like you're American right away. And you're gonna feel that you're not American also, but just as much as everybody else. You get the same amount of racism that everybody else getting, but also you're gonna feel belonging. But I want to link it to the World Cup. I'm gonna use two examples. Few World Cups ago, the French team was supposed to be one of the best. They're always the best, and they lost from the first round. And they came out and they were saying, and they like said, all our players are immigrants. They don't feel it. They don't play. And they from Africa. They don't, and obviously the whole French, most of Europe teams are from Africa. And one of the players said, when we win, we French. When we lose, we immigrant. They never had that thing. And the other thing is like Qatar. Qatar is like a very small country, and they working in the immigration system and they give nationality to a lot of people that, athletes, stuff like that. So most of uh, the Qatar team, when they play against, especially other Arab nations or other nations in Asia, there's like, oh, they're not really Qatari. They gave them the citizenship. You never see that here. When you represent the US, you represent the US. Nobody's saying it's like, oh, he's not from here, she's not from here. They lost because they're not, I don't know if you remember England, three African Americans, not, I think African England, right?
Yeah.
Mass penalty kicks
If
and
they were
everybody
African
went.
Americans, that would have been that would have been controversial.
Yeah, so they all like were lost their shit because three missed penalty kicks, and you don't find that much here, like when you are in an American team or your Team USA, you are in Team USA, you know?
Yeah. If they were African American, they would have made their kicks, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
But
also Balogun, who we're finding out he had his red card rescinded. He'll be in the game.
yeah, we
Oh
just
yeah?
found out right now. It's
He's an
amazing.
American because he was here. Like they wouldn't let his mom fly out, so she had to give birth here. And guess what? Birthright citizenship. We
I
have now
know.
our second best player because of that. If
Yeah.
anything, in the United States, when someone plays for another country and they can because of the other country's rules, we feel either a major sense of betrayal. Eileen Gu, who
Yeah.
Yeah.
cast her lot with the Communist Party of China and got paid a lot of money for it, the Olympian, the Winter Olympian, but also the Swedish pole vaulter from LSU. I forget his name, but there was a sense that I don't know, not like that kind of betrayal. He definitely has Swedish roots. The Swedes wanted him more. We don't care about pole vaulting. But it is a little like, come on, guy, play for America. Pole
Yeah.
vault for us.
But on the other hand, especially in soccer, you will find a lot of double citizenship want to play for Italy or France or England. And when they don't get picked, then they will choose the US, as I said.
Right.
But again, I think with sports at this time, like it's a little different than, Miracle and Ice and stuff like that when it's like very national thing. I think it has a lot to do with money now and with influence. Which I think in the case of Gu, I'm not mad at her. I think the way she said it, she have more influence into the Chinese. I mean, I'm sure she's getting paid a lot of money, but she would have got paid more money here as well. But I think it's more of the influence in her heritage, like that's what she said to, for the little girls in China. So maybe she have her own thing, and we don't know. I
Sure.
understand when people's like, oh,
Sure. I would say
you
sure.
but when you say, okay, you grew up here and you trained here and you become good here, you the one that worked hard. Um, yeah, but yeah, breaking news, the red card was just, suspended. It's amazing. And I think there's a lot of pressure. There's going to be a lot of controversy on this, but I'm glad that he's going to be playing.
Oh,
Um,
all of Belgium, uniting the Walloons and the French, uniting them in opposition to this. I mean, that was not a good red card. That
yeah,
was a regular play. Give him a yellow, maybe.
but listen, if you look at the, history of FIFA, they want to make sure it's industrial. Like Cristiano Ronaldo got a red card before the World Cup, and he was supposed to be suspended the first two games of the red card of the World Cup. And he's a moneymaker. The most expensive ticket is whenever Cristiano Ronaldo is playing. and they suspended it. So there, I was really expecting that they're gonna do same thing. Messi didn't even get a yellow card in the exact same tackle, if even worse, you know. So yeah, I was expecting it, but I didn't expect it was gonna happen like right now. I thought it was gonna happen right before the game, so Belgium doesn't have time to uh but I
No
don't know
feels.
what they did. All right, so let's talk about people. If we pick a couple of people, I know the list of invention and what America is long, but we only have an hour and I want to cover a lot of things. So who is beside me, who is the most American person that you think that shaped America or you feel it's America for you? Michel.
Well, Dwight Eisenhower, of course. And you can read all about him in The Light of Battle, Eisenhower D-Day and the Birth of the American Superpower, out by HarperCollins. But in addition to Dwight Eisenhower, I've always had a soft spot for Mark Twain as sort of a quintessential American, right? Someone who he even gave himself a fake name, which is another very sort of American thing to do. Like my last name is Paradis, and there aren't that many Paradis actually in France. There's some in Belgium, I think. But it's a name that is actually incredibly popular in North America, especially in the Quebecois side of things, in New England, because most of people who came over to the United States changed their name to Parody because they were typically avoiding debt or something else in Europe and didn't want to be found. So the idea of changing your name and becoming a star under a new name, whether or not you're Prince or Madonna or Mark Twain, I think it's just a very American thing. It's a very American idea of self-reinvention. And he was just such a, I mean, everyone knows Huck Finn, if they've read it in high school, but all of his work is so good. It's so sharp. It's so funny. And at times, just like so vicious and perceptive and loving all at the same time, that he is a very, again, he's just such a quintessential American figure. So if not Dwight Eisenhower for book sales, I'll say Mark Twain.
Mike?
Well, I think the hinge American, the most important American is not going to blow your minds. Put it this way, one way to figure out the most important of anything is contemplate its elimination and then say, would we still not just exist as we are or close to what we are, but at all? And it's Lincoln. But I don't want to do Lincoln because everyone does Lincoln. How about William Seward, right? Who was in Lincoln's cabinet and was a governor of New York and was almost assassinated. There was the plot to kill Lincoln also included Johnson, also included Seward, and they got to Seward. The guy who was supposed to assassinate Johnson just got drunk, but Seward was in braces from a riding accident when they stabbed him. They said that saved his life. So there's a statue of him in Madison Square Park, which is 12 blocks south of Madison Square Garden. He was the Secretary of State. No one has added more to the actual landmass of America than Seward with the purchase of Alaska, which was, of course, called Seward's Folly. And if you follow his stances on the important issue of the day, not just his stances, but what he actually did, he badly wanted to keep the United States together. He was vehemently against slavery. When it was clear that there was going to be a civil war, he dedicated himself to the Union cause in the Civil War. A little bit forgotten, overshadowed by not just Lincoln, but Grant, other members of the Lincoln milieu. But I've always had, because I'm a New Yorker, I've always had a little bit of a soft spot in my heart for William Seward.
When you said he bought Alaska, do you think like 250 and our 500 anniversary will be a podcast like this? And they talk about, well, President Trump bought Greenland. No, took Greenland. I'll go with
I think at the
Martin.
time it would be called Trumpland, though.
Yeah, I'll go with Martin Luther King. Obviously, the civil rights movement, it just as inspiration. When you have somebody that did what he did, but I think the fact that when you see posters all over and you just look at it and you know exactly how you feel when you look at it, I think that's important, especially for the good and bad that happen in this country. I think you always have hope when you have leaders like this. So yeah, that's what I will go with. Michel.
Can I like foot stomp your Martin Luther King one? Not just because it's like he's Martin Luther King, right? No one's going to criticize Martin Luther King. But it is also this, it gets to the, thing I said earlier that, America is very much an idea, right? It's not a place built on blood and soil in the same way that most other parts of the world are. And it's such an idea that even the people who have been done wrong by that idea have things that they can claim in that idea to
Yes.
claim like full ownership and full citizenship in the society, right? Like you mentioned Seward, I started thinking about Frederick Douglass, same sort of thing, right? It's a slave, an individual who is literally held by the Supreme Court to not be a person, went on and claimed the Declaration of Independence and ultimately even the Constitution as his charter document, right? A document that's there to protect him and those like him. And so that's pretty cool. I'm just gonna say that's a cool it's a cool country that you can have that happen.
Yeah. All right, who's your next guy person? Michelle.
Oh, I've no. Okay, I'll give you the full case on Eisenhower without giving you a book talk. But it's similar sort of situation, right? Here you have a kid born to religiously fanatical parents in the literal middle of the country, the middle of nowhere in 1890. Um, Go not only like then to West Point and not only to become a general in the army, but to become the supreme Allied commander of Europe, leads D-Day, beats the actual Hitler in World War II, and does so in a way that solidifies America's status as a global superpower that people want to join in, as a new kind of alliance. And and then goes on to be the president of the United States throughout the 1950s, which is, a real pivot point in our national story, becoming the sort of modern superpower that we are. And even at the time, like in the 40s, when Eisenhower was basically charming the Brits into basically giving away their empire, to the United States, right? That he was seen as lovable by the British, most especially the king. And in part because it, like his story, going from literal dirt poverty to being one of the seminal political military figures in the world, is like a fairy tale, right? That is a literal fairy tale. And it was possible in America. And one of the things that I think impressed the British and the French and all of the countries, even the Soviets, right, who would become our allies or at least our admirers in that period, was the fact that someone like Dwight Eisenhower was possible when they could not imagine a similar story taking place in their own countries.
All right, my next one might be controversial. Let's see opinion. How about Walt Disney?
Well, we could still visit his head, right?
Um, yeah, Mike, who's your next guy?
So I zigged and didn't do Lincoln. I did Seward. I'll do Benjamin Franklin because he was probably the most important scientist of the pre-revolutionary period. If he was just a scientist, he'd be an important figure. And he was absolutely the most important diplomat. So imagine that, both the most important scientist and diplomat. But just as the Senate, which was part of his construction ideas, the cooling saucer of the passions, he was the guy you could go to who actually had experience in this young country. And I was just reading Jill Lepore in the New Yorker talking about the drafting of the Declaration, and Jefferson, 33 at the time, so could be forgiven, and a raging egotist. He was the only one who could write the Declaration. He was on a committee of five, and the only person who he consulted with the Declaration was Franklin. And Franklin told this really great story where he said to Jefferson, "Yeah, you should write it yourself and not get any input because here's what editors do. One time when I was a printer in Philadelphia, a guy came to my store and he wanted to have a sign that said Thomas Menaker, creator of hats for a fine price. And he asked people to give him input. And someone said to him, "Well, for a fine price, who would think you'd rip them off? Take that off the sign." And then someone else said, "Well, creator of hats, people will see the hats in the window. Take that off the sign." And someone said to him, "Creator, no one thinks that you are a hat. So take this off the sign." And so basically, after all the edits, the sign would come to read Thomas Menaker. So just one of the many fascinating, very clever things about Benjamin Franklin, who would go to Italy and would go to France rather, and would charm the French and would get them. So did Jefferson, but would get them to ally with us in ways that if he didn't, there might not be an America. I think about these hinge points. You talked about my book, What If book upon further review. And there are so many contingencies in history. And in the beginning, I wrote about George Washington and the Battle of Long Island or the Battle of Brooklyn, called the same thing. And the number one thing that happened during that battle, which the Americans lost but lived to fight another day, the future Americans, was that it was foggy. Were it not for the fog, there might not be an America. But you could look at Franklin's life and think of not just the funny things or the clever things or the perspicacious things or the brave things. I mean, here's a guy who broke with his son and didn't talk to his son because his son was loyal to the British. You can think of all those things and admire him, but there are so many hinge points in the decisions and the wisdom and the guidance that he gave that were it not for Franklin's insight and actions, there might not be an America.
I get all my it's funny that you said that because I get all my Declaration of Independence from watching the movie National Treasure. You know,
Sure.
that's all the information I have. But yeah, so obviously there's so many people that we can talk about. It can take episodes and episodes, but I just want to get like a couple of hints. But now if you look back like 250 years, I mean a lot of, empires didn't last long or long enough or to that level with that kind of like not internal wars and all stuff. How do we go for 250 more and more? What did we get it right and what do we need to get it what did we get wrong that we need to fix? Especially like you see all this division that happening, but division with acceptance of the democracy and results so far. Bitter, yes, bad losers, yes, but still that. So how do you get for more? What do you think? Are you worried at all? Do you think there is things that need to desperately change? Michel.
So what do I think? So I think if we're gonna have 250 more, maybe this is just a way of saying what I think we have to do right and wrong. I'll say it that way. So I think the thing we do have to keep right is just keeping our eye on sort of optimism and innovation, right? There is a need to keep to think the future is going to be better than the past. And I do think right now, certainly, we are not in a period where that idea is popular, right? We look at new forms of technology, which are obviously have risks. Every new form of technology has risks, whether or not it's the internet or AI or biotechnology or quantum technology. And I think that there's a hair trigger now to see everything as a big risk that's going to be a tragedy and that we have to mitigate. And that is in some ways a very old European way of looking at the world and looking at the future. And there are risks, we got to deal with them, and we will. But I think that would be something that worries me, and that's something that I hope we can preserve. And that if we exist for another 250 years, it will be because we've been able to, recalibrate our current anxiety about risk and holding on to the past, whether or not we're trying to make America great again or trying to protect every individual sort of economic fiefdom that we can, right? That we can allow America to let its freak flag fly and to be weird and to just figure it out as we go along, because that when we've had that sort of openness and accompanied with an optimism, that's really when we pulled off some of our greatest accomplishments, whether or not it was D-Day or the moon landing or jazz or hip hop, right? Those are all exercises of just giving it a try and making it work. And so I hope that's that's the danger that we will lose that, and that's also what will save us if we are here in 250 years.
For me, I'll go I think we need leaders, real characters, not charismatic anymore. We have the Clintons, Obamas, Trump to an extent with his, he's very, very charming, but what I think we need real leaders. I'm not saying that they're not, but I'm saying like we need another like Lincoln, another Washington, another, we need somebody that really can lead. And I think that's a problem with the whole world, not just here. And I think a lot of people have to these days give a lot to go where they are to become a leader so that you pay the price along the way so you kind of have to pay it back, I guess. Um, but I think we need another Washington, Martin Luther King, all these guys, but we need somebody, many of them in different levels that take over that can actually unite and have the idea of us, like kind of like what Mike said was like, come on, let's do it. I wanna get more people born here than Austria or so, had that competition, build empire state building in like 18 months, all this. So I think leaders that really get the idea of America and not just winning an election. Mike.
13, 13 months. Empire State. Yeah, I'll riff on that. I was going to maybe nominate or talk about as a great American Bloomberg. I don't really think he's top 10, but compared to, you always hear about the plutocrats and technocrats, Musk, Bezos, Zuckerberg, and they're coming up short. I mean, Musk is given to, he's had many amazing innovations and as a whole has benefited humanity. The mass adoption of EVs is going to do more for him than everything he ever, any conspiracy he ever backed on Twitter. But it wasn't too long ago when our richest or almost richest people in the world were so extremely civic minded that, for instance, they gave away $60 billion, is something like what Bloomberg gave away. And because of the timing of him giving that away, if he just invested somewhat conservatively, he wouldn't be the 19th richest human on the planet now. He'd be seventh or eighth. And he has saved thousands, tens of thousands of lives. Like no one even knows this, but his anti-drowning initiatives in countries like Bangladesh, all over the world, but just in Bangladesh, is said to have saved over 1,000 lives a year. He also ran for mayor, as you might know, and served as mayor. And that's not always easy to do. I know you could say he spent a lot of his own money on it. That's the way of the world. Was an extremely capable, though not popular in terms of vibes, mayor. What if Musk, fine, not Musk, he has certain psychological predilections, but what if Bezos decided to play his game a little differently and went extremely civic minded and maybe doubled down on the Washington Post? It might be impossible because when Bloomberg was doing his thing, there was no one in the White House who was dead set on destroying Bloomberg. So I do think Trump colors all of this, but it would be great to have those kind of leaders back. And my number one thing that I worry about is how at each other's throats we are. And I think this is the most troubling poll I've seen in the last 5 years. Pew did a study and they asked people to rate the morality and ethics of people in your own country. And the United States was the only country where we think our fellow citizen is a bad person. 53% said either very bad or somewhat bad. Americans about other Americans. And the next at each other's throats country were Turkey and Brazil. I don't know if you heard. Turkey has Erdogan as a leader, and Brazil just dodged a Bolsonaro. And those are countries that are 2 or 3 orders of magnitude behind us in terms of economics. So they should be a whole lot less comfortable. And you go down the list, and what I found really surprising is the number they surveyed about 25 countries. So number 25 on how much do you hate your fellow citizen is Canada. 92% of Canadians like Canadians, and only 7% think other Canadians are very bad. First of all, Canadians aren't very bad, so that's one reason. But when you think about, I usually blame it on media. They have the same media as us, tiny little differences, right? The CBC mandates that certain Canadian properties get more airplay, and they have slightly different rules about what you can advertise to kids, but they're on Instagram, they're on X, they're on TikTok, they're getting their brains poisoned with the same stuff that I attribute as the main factor in why we hate each other. And they're only at 7%, and we're at 53%. And I have some ideas about how to get away from that, and a big idea is to get past the Trump era, but it's not going to be easy, and it's very, very necessary.
I think it's a luxury that we get polls is like, do you like, the other person? While some countries will have polls like, did you have lunch today? How many people, that. So it is a luxury, and I think I think a lot of this is also happening because of a lot of us taking things for granted as well. And I think it's good to celebrate the success, but also recognize how lucky we are in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So if we talk about like let's start a couple of things that you think that was really bad here that you think either we need to fix or it's been fixed, but one of the major problem that um, identify America at some point. Maybe it becomes now a success by, fixing it, or something that you think it's a problem. You said the Trump era obviously is something, but I think it's bigger than just that. It's the division and stuff like that. But in general, if you pick two things each that you think it's a major problem that identified America back in from the beginning till now, or you think that we need to fix on it, Michelle, what would you pick the two?
Yeah, maybe piggybacking on some of your answers as well as what I was talking about. I think one of the biggest dangers that leads to a lot of these problems is a scarcity mindset versus an abundance mindset. And I don't mean abundance in the sort of, certain sort of progressive talking point at the moment. I mean literally that people think that the world is getting smaller and the opportunities are shrinking, and to some extent that is true in a lot of parts of this country. And I do think that's one of our major problems, is making sure that the avenues for opportunity to pursue your happiness, to borrow a now 250-year-old phrase, remain open to people. Because as soon as people feel like, you know, I'm not going to be able to get into college and afford college the way my parents could, I'm not going to be able to get a house, I'm not going to be able to get a girlfriend or a wife, or a husband, and all of the or a job that's going to give me self-respect and satisfaction. As soon as people have that anxiety where they feel genuinely that the pie is shrinking, they're going to become much more suspicious of one another. They're going to become much more corrupt. They're going to become much more grasping. Our policies generally will be more, I think, conservative in a negative direction, right? We're going to spend far more money trying to preserve what those who have rather than creating new opportunities for young people. And if you look at our federal budget, that's literally all it does now. And so I think that's one of our that's certainly one of my big concerns and one of our big problems of the day, is that we've moved from not just optimism to pessimism, but from an attitude of, the frontier is abundant. We can always make our own way if you have the sort of wherewithal and desire to thrive, to a much more cynical, much more scarcity oriented attitude, not only towards one another, but I think towards our own futures. And that I think is very corrosive.
For me, I would say, the racism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, all these are just grown to a level that I've seen people enjoy the hate, proud of it, either openly or not, and it just affecting a lot. And I think there's a lot of people are becoming like this, and it becomes a culture in a way. And I think we need to face these problems. It's never, and it's not always just based on action. It's not because 9/11 you become Islamophobic, or because of like the war in Gaza you become anti-Semitic or racist. I think people always had it in them. And I think it's a battle that we all should go, because if somebody's anti-Semitic, I'm not going to be happy about it, because they definitely Islamophobic too, most likely racist as well. It's not gonna, so we all on the same side, and we have to be able to do it. And I don't like the fact that when we do it, we face it, we do it in a way it's like kind of like we do with sports sometimes, like, oh, everybody wins, everybody get a medal, everybody think we have to face it in the right way. I think that's a major challenge, and comes back again to my point of leaders, because you not only need leaders that will face that, but you need leaders from their own community come up and face that problem and identify when there's a problem from their end. Mike?
Right, but we need leaders. The poor leaders of late have been an epiphenomenon of some of the rot below, right?
Yep.
So I don't think that Donald Trump shows up and he takes a functional, very efficient country and turns it sour, right? I think he takes advantage of much of the dysfunction. So, one of the biggest areas of dysfunction, I think, is our inability to recognize progress. And to some extent, it's baked into the American ethos. We move on, we don't look back that much. Sometimes it's bad when we don't look back at our past ills. And then when we do reckon with them, maybe that reckoning shows up in extreme forms, such as we should recognize the legacy, not just of slavery, but of Jim Crow, but of the redlining, all the post even uh, Civil Rights Act degradations of the African American experience. But when we do it to the extreme of, say, the 1619 Project, which literally says, no, 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 1776 isn't the founding, it's 1619 when slavery first appeared on our shores, even though it wasn't slavery and we didn't have the concept of that. That's such an overcorrection, or that it's not even a correction. That's not what I wanted to say, though. What I wanted to say was a big problem is the inability to recognize progress. And just to take one rubric, we have eliminated so many deaths, hundreds of thousands of deaths through the regulation of particulate matter from coal plants. Clean Air Act. I'm just talking since 1990, the estimates are we've saved tens of thousands of lives annually by not only closing down coal plants, but just regulating to the point where the smallest bits of particulate matter couldn't get into people's lungs. And I am sure that most of the survivors, almost every single survivor doesn't recognize themselves as such. Because who says, oh, I could have died of a lung disease, but I didn't? You just live your life. But there are 100 different examples of progress, of accomplishment that is just baked in or just ignored. And I think the major narrative is, well, we can't have progress and progress is impossible or regulation never work. Not only does it work, it's kind of the most amazing miracle we've ever seen. And we don't even know that it's happened. So I wish there was more recognition of progress,
Yeah.
because how do you have future progress if you don't know what worked in the past?
And that back to my point I said in the very beginning, the COVID vaccine, I think it's like kind of like people just like it happened in 9 months, like say, how many lives were saved. I think sometimes when you accomplish something way too quickly, and I think like Trump closing the border so early and so quick, he never get a lot of credit for it because it was just done and forgotten, versus a lot of people didn't were able to do it. So yeah, I agree with you. And I'll add to that also is like the fact that we need to stop labeling people fully about something. Like I will take Trump as an example again. Obviously a lot of people like him, a lot of people don't like him, half the country do. But I think like anybody else, he does some good things and he has some bad things. So you have to recognize you can't just hate 100% or love 100%. We become more in politics like sports team. You're just supporting your team, regardless they play good or bad or did foul or not. You have to be able to um, give people credit when it's due, and take it away from them. All right, let's take one more. Michelle.
What sucks? What one more thing
Yeah.
that sucks, or one more thing that's good? Yeah, I'm just gonna riff on Mike's point because I 100% agree with it. Is as a historian, you look back at not just they sometimes say history is a foreign country. It's another dimension, right? The things that people took for granted 150 years ago would shock the conscience of most people today, and that's not just um like death and disease, right? Most the reason the lifespan was like 45 at the turn of the 20th century was because of violent accidents, right? You just got hit by a piece of machinery or shot because violent crime was way higher 200 years ago or 150 years ago than it is today, like inconceivably higher. And even in my lifetime, Mike mentioned he's from New York. Most people don't know the murder rate in New York in 1990. Mike, I'm sure knows, but the murder rate in New York in 1990 was like 2,500 people were murdered in New York in 1990. Last year, I think it was on track to be less than 300. And so, the amount of progress that we just live through that we don't even perceive as such. I'll take racism as well, which is one of the more controversial ones. You mentioned 1619, right? People act like we live in the most racist or homophobic societies we've ever lived in, right? The amount of just casual racism that you would experience and sexism that you would experience, not just in the 1890s, right, but in the 40s, like when we had a segregated society, literally like apartheid-based society and army, or in the 80s when you were still legally allowed to rape your wife in some states, right? The like things today that would literally just or that it was a crime to be gay, right? For until 2004, there were states that it was a crime to engage in gay sex, right? And when I talk to my students about that, they just can't even understand the world that existed that where that was permissible. And so that's what I mean. It's like we look back often with inappropriate shame at some of the terrible things that were done in this country. But I think in the spirit as well of Frederick Douglass and Martin Luther King and many others as well, um, like the same crimes of our past, the fact that we see those today as crimes of our past is evidence of progress, is evidence of the progress we have made to actually be better people, to make a more perfect union.
Yeah.
And so 250 years in, again, we let our freak flag fly and we kind of muddle along and we figure it out.
I'll riff on that for a second. Do you remember a couple months ago there was a shutdown over the fact that one of the spending bills favored by the Republicans would essentially strip benefits to people who needed them to afford health care? And that's terrible. I agree. That's a terrible thing. And the Democrats need to do whatever they needed to do to stop it. But there was rhetoric about throwing people back to the Stone Ages or bringing them back to a place of, by the rhetoric, by the flavor of the rhetoric, something medieval. And I remember thinking, yes, you're returning to 2009, pre-ACA. And that's bad. It's bad that people can't afford healthcare, but you're literally, what you're saying, this end of the world stuff is literally propelling us back, 16 years. Okay, I think that's
to
bad, but let's put it in perspective.
the
All
year the iPhone
Yeah.
was invented.
all right, last question. If an alien, which we know that they're here, you know, not
Not
alien
not
meaning
not over the
not
southern border, sir.
yeah, not that alien from coming from the southern border, but coming from outer space, and they take you and tell you, okay, tell me about America. What is that to you? You guys celebrate 250 years. What's going on? What is America? Tell me, just summarize it for me. I'm the leader of the aliens. What would you say?
We have more guns than you, even though you traveled across the universe. Uh,
Michael, what would you say?
I'd say that we're the big friendly dog that wags its tail and knocks over everything without realizing it.
Yeah, I would say that we the leader of the world. If you need, to negotiate, it will be us. If you need to fight, most likely we will lead the fight. However, I'm here for the sexual experiments if you guys need any. So, but
Well,
uh,
so here, I'll borrow one of my earlier answers, and I'll say, "Welcome. You can become an American too." So,
oh, that's a good one. Yeah, okay. It's the idea that, I think a lot of the world want to do, and I think we are in the way to perfect it in some way. Um, But yeah, it's every place is good and bad. You know, you're only gonna recognize how good things are if you experience bad at any point. Not visited a country, but lived in a long time there, and you understand the the underground, the business, the day to day, the actual hate, the actual racism, all this. So happy 250 years and much more. And hopefully I'll see one of you president one day. And
Oh yeah.
yeah. Michelle, if people enjoy this and want to follow you or buy your book or email you or maybe
yeah, yeah. Please email me. Don't follow me. I'm very paranoid if people follow me.
okay. And
But
what can they read or do
oh
to
yeah,
get to
yeah,
work?
no, always feel free to email me. I'm very easy to Google. But my books are Blight of Battle, which is a biography of Eisenhower, and then another book called Last Mission to Tokyo, which is about war crimes after the Second World War. But I'm always happy to hear from folks too, so feel free to reach out.
Yeah, and he's a regular here, so if you have any questions, always send it, and we'll make sure that we will send it to you. Mike.
I'm going to ground. There's no way to follow me. For 12 years, I had a podcast and I just announced I'm ending it. And I'll tell you what I'm doing in like a week or two. But for the next 4 days, you could listen to the gist. There'll be some ongoing content
Yeah.
without
However,
me.
it's good news. It's not bad news. It's a major change.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm very happy for you, and we could talk about it off the air until it's
Yeah,
announced.
congratulations.
Uh,
Thanks.
but yeah, can people follow you or see you at Maine this summer? Are you gonna be there with me to Norm and
We just got two puppies, so they're going to keep us home. We adopted them from St. Lucia. And, we're just like the aliens, they too could become an American. It was actually a pretty easy system.
all
You
right,
just have to look at the
250
size of their
years.
teeth.
Yeah, 250 years. And happy birthday, America. It's amazing Life from America podcast. Thank you guys. It's great to always have you. And we'll see you soon.